I love my community.
How about another hand for our definite musical emergency people? Also a huge testament to community, so thank you both so much. Thank you. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So before I begin, I need your help in making the next 10 or so minutes go a little more interactive. So hidden in my share with you all is a phrase. I don't know how many times, I didn't count. But that phrase is tiny acts of moral courage. What I'm hoping is that every time you hear that phrase, you will respond with, "Here comes the sun." Now, if you're online, I hope that you will type in the chat, "Here comes the sun," and interact with us. So the phrase you're looking for is tiny acts of moral courage, which might be what you need to muster to even loudly say those words here in the sanctuary. But I bet you can. So now that that's out of the way, I'm going to breathe because I am feeling very anxious about the next few days. It seems like everywhere I turn, there are horrifying stories in the news. Stories of our fellow Americans enacting hate and sometimes physical violence on others, including poll workers, trans siblings, and other marginalized community members. And after witnessing so much of that online and on the news, I felt a question raise up deep in my being. And that was, how did we arrive at this point? And then I sat with that question. And embarrassingly, I recognized the privilege inherent in even asking it. As a queer man, I've experienced my fair share of hate, especially during the 80s amid the AIDS epidemic. However, I recognize now that my whiteness and my maleness has insulated me from so much of the historic vitriol and harassment that seems prevalent yet again today. For many of you, these times may also seem a bit different and a bit anew. But unfortunately, the hate we are witnessing has been ongoing for centuries in this country and for thousands of years in the broader world. Now, I invite you to take a moment and check in with your feelings right now. Suppose you sense anger in my words, or disbelief of what I'm saying, or perhaps frustration with me pointing out a privilege I recognized in myself. But there's an inherent history of this place that we call home, and it's not pretty. And in that case, of all of those feelings I just lifted up, I ask you to reflect on the history and origins of our country. Ask yourself if many folks who identify themselves as Native American or African American would share the sentiment that all of this seems new. Native Americans have witnessed and continue to survive the historic decimation of their cultures, all the while battling economic and psychological challenges just to lead thriving lives today. The same applies to our African American siblings whose long struggle for equality has resulted in a disproportionate wealth distribution and whose very voting rights are actively being suppressed once again, except this time it's happening to all of us. This hate is objectively and factually not new at all. We stand on a precipice where the very heart of our democratic experiment may either soar higher toward its promise of treating all humans as equal, or plunge back into the ages of discrimination and hate that many fought against not so long ago. These are the questions that I'm pondering today, and I've been grappling with them for the past few months, and truthfully, for the past many years, ever since a movement emerged, seemingly bent on returning us to a past where only some of us survive. We cannot and will not go back. In our faith tradition, we hold values that anchor us in tradition, those aspects of our past that we love and that we feel have made us better people, all the while learning and growing as life forges us ahead, bringing us a freedom to take in new information and adjust our philosophies and actions to improve this one precious world. This week, I was reminded that this forging ahead, this path to wholeness and freedom, always comes with a cost. 3 days ago, while attending the Everybody Belongs rally in Lafayette for one of our MDUUC friends who was stopped and frisked outside his home last Halloween, I was given the opportunity to reflect on a powerful truth expressed by the freed enslaved orator and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. These are his words from his own writings, the West India Emancipation Speech of 1857.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. And it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. In the light of these ideas,
the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. While I understand oppression, I also recognize that my whiteness buffers my knowledge. Over my life, I've allowed the oppression of others to continue with little demand for its end. As often, I saw it as not my struggle. I've come to understand that this perspective is contrary to Unitarian Universalism. Our tradition demands we understand and embrace the deep interdependence of all of us, working tirelessly for justice, equity, and plurality, regardless of our personal experiences with marginalizations or threats to our own personhood. As Douglass reminds us, there can be no progress without struggle. Therefore, we need tips and tricks in our spiritual, psychological, and emotional toolkits to bolster our spirits and keep our eyes on the prize. This phrase, keep your eye on the prize, was used by the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s, originating from a gospel song known by many names, such as Gospel Plow and Hold On. I vividly recall the first time I learned about this song and phrase. It was during a history class in college titled Rhetoric of Race Relations back in 1993, 94. Don't focus on the years. My amazing professor, Dr. Keith Jenkins, who's probably not watching, but hi if you are, at Rochester Institute of Technology, shared stories of that song's origin and its use in the civil rights movement. It was there that I learned of a pivotal student-led organization in the civil rights era, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. This group consisted of young activists like Ella Baker, who fought bravely for justice and equality. Its members demonstrated unwavering courage, engaging in nonviolent resistance, such as sitting at segregated lunch counters and risking their own lives to register Black voters. I became fascinated with this organization and its methodologies of community organizing. Their practices of tiny acts of moral courage provide a roadmap for others wishing to engage in collective liberation. I would never have imagined that nearly 30 years after taking that class, that I would meet one of the major organizers from that remarkable movement, Mr. Stuart House. At the Everybody Belongs rally, I had the incredible privilege of being with Mr. House, sharing food and engaging in conversation with him. It was a history in real time for me. As we spoke, I was struck by his still unwavering commitment to the cause of justice, even at the age of 80+ years old. Stuart House's work within the civil rights movement alongside SNCC was marked by tireless efforts to dismantle segregation and promote voting rights for African Americans. He even shared an amazing story about the origins of the Black Panther Party's iconic image and recounted significant acts of resistance, such as promoting Black voter registration in Selma, Alabama in 1967, a tiny act of moral courage that landed him in jail on trial for inciting a riot. His stories reminded me of the immense power ordinary individuals wield to effect change, a truth echoed throughout history, really. During World War II, amid the terror of the Nazi regime, some everyday people performed tiny acts of moral courage to counterbalance the horrors of mass killing and destruction of civic life as they knew it. One such person was a young Dutch activist, Cornelia Notnorus. The Notnorus family provided refuge and sustenance to those hunted by the regime. She was only 13 at the time. She showcased courage that ordinary folks can muster in extraordinary circumstances. Here are her own reflections in her own words.
The best antidote to fear is action. We did not become brave all at once. Little things added up. We bought this paper there for the underground. We took in these Jewish children. We made out false passports. Our involvement got deeper and deeper, but we were not brave all at once.
We need not be brave all at once. Just like House and Notnorus, we too must feel empowered to contribute to the collective good by engaging in whatever tiny moral acts of courage we can muster. All right, regularly. This practice of engaging in these tiny acts that may seem frivolous to you prepares our hearts for the moments that we may be required to do more risky or demanding actions of resistance. Because as Douglas noted, power concedes nothing without a demand. And we will need to hold our leaders accountable regardless of the outcome of this election. These tiny acts of moral courage create ripples outward, inspiring others to build a community rooted in love and in action, not just hollow words. As we navigate these challenging times, let us not forget that our democracy is a living, breathing entity sustained by each of us through the actions we take daily. Although the weight of the apprehension shrinks just a bit for me as we approach the election, because of communities like this, I know that we can find strength in the legacies of all those who came before us, who already dealt and continue to live in the shadow of all of the oppression before. It is crucial now more than ever, I feel, to leverage whatever privilege we have, in my case, my whiteness, my maleness, and use it as a force for good. Whether it's volunteering at a polling station, spreading factual information to combat disinformation, or engaging in open dialogues with those around us, even those we disagree with. Every action counts. When fear tries to paralyze us, let action become our remedy. I urge each of us to hold steadfast to our moral compass. Let it guide our words, our thoughts, and our deeds as we strive to do what Rihanna tells us, and that's to find love in a hopeless place. So, as we gather today and on Wednesday and Tuesday, if you need that extra space, we are gathering together to find that hope. But we also want to remind ourselves and all of those around us that indeed we are the sun, and here we come.